And welcome to our session on the USD Discovery District. Ryan is going to tell us all about what's going on over there. We have about 25 people in the room, and I would remind the people in the room to silence your cell phones. And Ryan will take questions as they come up, which means I have to run from one end of the room to the other and back and forth. So if you would raise your hand, I'll come over with the microphone. We use the microphone so that the people on Zoom can hear the questions. Thea is going to try to type those questions in as we go, so the people on Zoom, if you've missed the questions, we'll try to get them that way, and we will ask Ryan to try to remember to repeat it if we don't get it. I believe we have about 70 people on Zoom. June is the online host. And if you've got a question online, if you'd like to type it in, June will read those questions when we get to the right point. All right. Right?
I know there's a delay, so,
Yes,
there it is. Okay, I can kind of hear myself. First of all, I just want to thank you guys for allowing me to come in and talk, and hopefully this isn't like the most boring presentation that you guys have had. When do classes start? Or September. Okay, so you're just starting your year off. Okay, so you'll get all the boring presentation out of the way first. My name is Ryan. I'm with the USD Discovery District. Again, very informal. I tend to roam around and talk, but if you have questions, if you guys have comments, very welcome. I see Aaron Anthony's here. Evidently, they let anyone in these presentations. So, but I really appreciate. I've been out here with the USD Discovery District for I started back in 2015. So, show of hands, who here knows what the Discovery District is? Yeah. Okay, maybe show of other hands. Who here has a lot of confusion as to what the Discovery District? Thanks, Bob. He raised his hand. He jumped out of his seat there. Not unlike everyone else in the community, right? So the thought process here is just to help educate everyone on what the Discovery District is. As you look out west, is that way, right? That way. Okay. Horrible with cardinal directions. West, we have all of the corn, or is it beans? I think it's beans this year, right? A lot of land that is used. It's right now farmland, and so again, one of the criticisms we get at the Discovery District is there's been a lot of false starts, right? So that's kind of the narrative that we're kind of here to to try and catch everybody up on all the work that's being done. So again, my name is Ryan. I'm with USD Discovery District. My title officially, they tell me, occasionally I have to use it, as Chief Operating Officer. I started out in 2015 doing the books, right? So, like the Asian guy shows up in the room and everybody's like, oh, you're good with math or you're good with money. So way back in the day, the Discovery District was attached to Zeal. Anyone know what Zeal was? Anybody know what the South Dakota Technology Business Center, like this big long, that building way down on Career Avenue? The executive director of Zeal, or SBDC as we endearingly refer to it, was also the executive director of the USD Discovery District. And I apologize, I'm going to jump around here. I always like to start off with, this is an image of our master plan. And ultimately, way back when, there's a gentleman by the name of James Abbott who had this idea, right? He had traveled around and looked at research parks around the country. However, coincidentally, it matched up with a study, an economic development study that was done here in Sioux Falls by Ford Sioux Falls in the early 2000s. And they said, hey, we think because of your growing economy, we think you could benefit from two things: a technology incubator. Anyone know what that is? Show of hands. I didn't know what that was. Technology incubator and a research park. Familiar with Triangle Park? Yes, no? Yeah. So the idea was you want to, within the context of economic development and workforce development, we wanted to hyper accelerate things that were happening that would benefit not only the state of South Dakota, but the region. And we wanted to recruit companies where we talk about brain drain, leaving South Dakota, really smart people. Fortunately, good, bad, or indifferent, that's why I'm still here. But the idea was that we would create an environment for the collision of, so I always kind of start off with the mission statement, or the vision statement, excuse me, to create a dynamic and collaborative environment where talent, research, and innovative businesses interact to create new ideas, new technologies, and new opportunities impacting our region and our world. This is a pretty broad statement. This is a pretty big lift, right? And quite frankly, I look at this in my very advanced age in life and think a lot of this is going to happen after I'm gone. But somebody had the vision and the foresight to say, hey, we should probably invest in this and see what happens. So what you're looking at here is a rendition of our master plan. So President Abbott from USD said, hey, you know what? There was a collaboration, South Dakota Student Loan Corp. There's a whole lot of details that are kind of fuzzy, but ultimately there's about 253 acres out here from North 60th to North 54th, and then on the west side, Marion Road, and on the east side, I-29. That land is owned by the South Dakota Board of Regents. And there was some legislation put in place way back in 2012, authorizing the Board of Regents to establish research park corporations and develop research parks on lands that was controlled by the Board of Regents. So what's interesting about where we're at today, it's still 2022, right? We haven't turned the page on. What's interesting about today is, as you can see, a lot of this stuff started back in 2003, right? So what would be the criticism of the Discovery District today? Just anybody? Yeah. Progress. Where is the progress, right? Well, today you guys get to find out, and we'll see tomorrow if I still have a job. So the master plan was completed in 2016, 2017. Hey, there's a familiar face. Hey, Harriet. Now I have to be good because she knows my parents. But I always like to, again, start off with, we want to impact, and we have great stories about people from South Dakota impacting our world, right? So the paved roads out here, again, turned around, Nobel, which goes east and west, and Francis, which leads us to the promised land, or what I refer to as Walmart. Those are two streets that are paved, right? They are intentionally named. Dr. Francis Kelsey, former USD pharmacology professor and Vermilion practicing physician. Dr. Kelsey became a medical officer for the FDA, where she's regarded as a heroine for refusing to approve that thing. Thank you. And as I understand, it was used as a sedative for pregnant mothers. And she said, hey, I think that could be a problem, right? So kind of pioneered. So, and the reason I show you guys this is because there's a lot of intent that has gone behind the Discovery District. An extreme amount of heavy lifting, right? Nobel Drive, E.O. Lawrence, Ernest Orlando Lawrence was a pioneering American nuclear scientist. When I came here in 1990, well, actually I came to South Dakota in like the 70s, but as you can tell, I grew up on a farm and drove tractors and raised pigs. But when I came here, I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know the impact that South Dakotans had on the rest of the world. Born in Canton, South Dakota, right? We've all been to Canton. Lawrence was a graduate of the USD, earned his PhD in physics at Yale. And also, as President Abbott likes to point out, his brother was also a USD grad and known for the father of nuclear medicine. So as we go back to the history of the Discovery District, there's been a lot of groundwork, a lot of foundation that's put in place, and a lot of intent. They had to go to the state legislature. They had to change state constitution. They had to put land in place. So it wasn't, and I'm always reminded this by President Abbott, it was a lot of people that helped out with this, a lot of people. And so we're just picking up. So when I joined in 2015, it was kind of a mature organization. But what didn't we have in 2015 that we still don't have today? Let's say that. A building, yes. I get reminded of that actually every day. But yes, that is absolutely true. So I like to just rewind the clock. Any questions so far? Do we have any questions from our friends on virtual? Okay. $4.2 million HRSA grant was secured for the Gear Center. Are you guys familiar with the Gear Center? Do you know what it does? That's another person that you should probably have come speak to you. And he's actually better looking and a better speaker than I am. But Dr. Dan Ingebretson, who is the director of the Gear Center. The Gear Center stands for Graduate Education and Research. So very few people know that there is a CGMP space over there, CGMP, good manufacturing practices. There's a pharmaceutical grade fill finish facility over there with what they call, it's a really big machine, but long story short, companies who are going through drug clinical trials can utilize that facility because of the clean room space. There's not a space geographically for states that rival what that building is over there. And so the foresight was, if we're going to need some sort of, if we're going to seed a research park, we're going to need equipment, we're going to need facilities to do some of this stuff. In 2006, Great Plains Education Foundation donates the 252 acres. There's probably a few people in here who were a part of that. Legislation passed designating 80 acres. So the USD Discovery District only has control of 80 acres out here. And in 2017, Kent Cutler, who is developing the land south of 54th up against 29, sorry, I'm going the wrong direction, came to us and said, hey, I have to finish 54th Street North, right? Everybody know if you have land, who's responsible for putting the streets and roads in? Yeah, right? And who gets to pay that bill? So Mr. Cutler came to us and said, hey, you got the north half of the street, I got the south half of the street, will you help me pay? And he obviously approached the Board of Regents because they own the land. They didn't have the resources, so the Discovery District, the foresight of the leader there at the time said, we'll pay, but it was one of those, if you give me a hamburger today, I'll pay you Thursday kind of things. In lieu of that, we requested from the Board of Regents an additional 40 acres or an option for an additional 40 acres. Because as a developer, what's probably one of the most important assets? Land. Yes, I can't build a building, which we know we don't have yet, without additional land. So again, I want to go back and kind of rewind the clock and let everybody know that there was a lot of planning and a lot of intent put into this. In 2014, the South Dakota legislature appropriates $500,000 for the Gear Center expansion and $500,000 for the USD Discovery District. So the USD Discovery District is a 501c3. All of our funding sources on the operational side are tax-based. What does that mean? Any financial people in the room? Or past financial, retired? No. What it means is I run a very lean budget, right? I have to beg, borrow, and steal every dollar that I possibly can. And so with that, that $1 million, what we were able to do is parlay that into infrastructure, because the next element, as a developer, you have land, what do you need to do? Make improvements, right? Probably want a street or two, probably need utilities, right? And so we have an operational budget, which I'll share with you, but our operational budget doesn't cover any of the infrastructure. So 2014, the South Dakota Governor's Office of Economic Development commits up to $867,000, matching USD's commitment of $1 million to equip and operate my good manufacturing practice facility over at the Gear Center. And then here's where we're begging the federal government. We got money, and that money allowed us to complete Nobel and Francis, so we can all get to Walmart and now BP, right? And that was a really big deal. What, for those of you who know, the EDA grant, what is required of that $755,000? Anyone? Yeah. So we got the award, but we had to go beg, borrow, and steal another $755,000 to be able to secure that. So those were also state dollars. Those were also, so our funding sources right now are the South Dakota Border Regions, USD, Forward Sioux Falls. Anybody contributors to Forward Sioux Falls campaign? Thank you. And the, did I say four? South Dakota Border Regions, Forward Sioux Falls, City of Sioux Falls. And the City of Sioux Falls came along and said, you know what, we understand. So the interesting piece here, or what happened, so from 2017, 2018, 2019, really when the page turned in 2018, we had, if we look back at our state and our city, we had a new mayor, we had a new governor, we had a new president of USD. What's interesting about the Discovery District is what three letters? Any alum from USD? Yeah. Yes. We're like, it was the Discovery District, we like bleed red and white. In fact, when I had to make sure I'm not wearing blue. When I wear blue or yellow, I get in a lot of trouble. But the Discovery District is actually a separate 501c3. The sole stakeholder is the South Dakota Border Regions. However, when the organization was incorporated, there was this old guy, President Abbott, who said, you know what, I'm going to cede the operational funding of this. I'm going to do it. There was an offer made to other regental schools. But at the end of the day, it became the USD Discovery District. According to our bylaws, the president of the university is always the chairperson of our board. I want to go back. So again, rewind, 2019, I had, of all of our stakeholders, I had 3 of them who had new leadership. So that was something that we had to catch all of those organizations, all of those cabinets, those new people. We had to catch them up on what was going on with the Discovery District. And on top of that, we had to make sure we finalized, there was a shot clock on that $755,000 from the EDA. So the Mayor Tanakin, I think day 10 of his tenure, the Discovery District approached him and said, hey, we could sure use some money, because at that time, anybody familiar with SAB Biotherapeutics? Yeah, anybody have their stock? So SAB and a company named Alumend, is familiar with Alumend? Yeah, I see a couple nods. Again, highly recommend. If you don't, maybe you can have Dan come over, give a tour over there. It would be really cool. Alumend is an organization that was originally PhotoBiomed. They were rolled up into Avera, and they are developing mechanical treatments for peripheral artery disease. I have no idea what peripheral artery disease is, but ultimately they've been developing this. They've been a part of Alumend, or excuse me, a part of Avera for 10 years. Those were the first 2 identified tenants of the USD Discovery District. We've had 2 groundbreakings. I don't know if any of you attended those. I like to proactively mention that because, again, that's also something I'm reminded on a daily basis. The Discovery District selected, because we had the infrastructure dollars and we put in Nobel and Francis, we were moving forward with the building. The first iteration of the building was a 43,000 square foot multi-tenant building. Everybody know where, if you go west on Nobel, the parking lot where Jim's little shack is, that lot just to the west of that is where we broke ground. That was where 2 buildings in the first iteration of the plans, 2 buildings were going to happen. A 40,000 square foot multi-tenant building and a 80,000 square foot core and shell for a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility. What happened between 2019 and 2020. Yeah, something none of us saw coming, right? Well, at least I didn't. I don't know. But, so coincidentally, our tenants pulled out, said, hey, we're going to develop therapeutics for COVID. We're going to go after some federal dollars to do that. So we lost our anchor tenant. So strike one, right? That's why we don't have a building. The pandemic hit us pretty hard because, again, it's the USD research part, right? What do we focus on? Life science, biotech, bio devices, orthopedic implants, biomedical engineering. All of that stuff was greatly impacted by the pandemic. However, we built streets. So streets aren't as easy to recognize or identify with as a building, but we have streets. So around that parking lot that's out there where Mr. Barkema's little shed is, we have Haynes and Pell Avenue. They're not paved yet. And then I have a construction road that I sometimes take that connects Marion and but don't tell Jim that connects Marion and the campus here. But we laid all the infrastructure for that building, all the utilities, except for the internet carriers, the ISPs, water, sewer. We did a whole bunch of work for that site, and then the pandemic happened. And so with that, we were left without a tenant. And we had gone through, the state had put up several $1 million for planning. And then we kind of had this momentum stopper that we refer to as COVID, and we had to regroup. So here's, I guess, President Abbott calls it phase 2, and then now phase 3. So President Abbott, who was on the board, he was the president of USD. Everybody know who, yeah. And he apologizes he can't be here today. He just got in and not feeling well and had a couple other engagements, but normally he would be here. He told me don't mess this up. So if you know him, hopefully you'll relay to him and lie to him that it was a very informational presentation. He had the unfortunate luck of being asked to come back and work with the Discovery District in August of last year. So his commitment was he wanted to get away from everything for at least a year. And then President Gestring, current president of USD, said, hey, President Abbott, this is kind of your baby. Like, you were involved in all of this stuff, the legislature passing the 80 acres, the research park. It was part of all of that. So he came back, took one look at me and said, maybe not. But I begged him and I said, look, we can make this happen. With this is a good, and I'm kidding you. He is a firm believer in what the mission of the research park could be. So knowing, again, we're a 501c3, our 4 funding sources are all tax-based. What probably don't we have much of? Money, right? So the original model was, if we go back and look at the plan, the Discovery District was always originally meant to be a horizontal land developer. We put in streets, roads, infrastructure. I'd beg them for a Starbucks or scooters. I don't know, any coffee drinkers in the room. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we need money, we need resources. So the original model was we have a private developer come in, right? Because who owns the land? Board of Regents, right? Can I sell the Board of Regents land? I mean, I've tried a couple times to make a couple side deals, but no, I cannot sell this land. So all of the evergreen element to the Discovery District is I can create a land lease for all of these building footprints, and that would generate my sustainable operational income. But what we didn't have is the ability to vertically develop. And so we went out and recruited a private developer. There was a huge RFP that was released. This was back in 2016, 2015, 2016. A huge RFP that was released, and we were looking for what we called a preferred developer. And they had the rights to the first 5 projects to the Discovery District, and they were the developer on the SAB Alumen building. So fast forward, pandemic, a lot of bad things happen. All of a sudden, we're left with, as everybody points out, no building, corn, beans. I even lost 8.47 acres to the roads and to some other land that washed away. And quite frankly, the amount of revenue we were generating from the agricultural land lease was not going to keep us in diamonds and furs. So ultimately, President Abbott comes on board August of last year and says, hey, let's see if we can get some of these dollars from the state legislature. Yes, sir.
Could you show us, got the district on the screen, could you show us where the 80 acres was?
Absolutely.
Where the 40-acre option, if indeed that was granted?
Yeah.
Where's that located?
Yeah.
And where the building was, that you had the tenants that bailed out?
That bailed, yeah, absolutely. So the question is, of the image on the screen right now, where is the 40 acre, or excuse me, the 80 acres that we have control of? Where is the 40 that was that is our option? And then where the building was going to sit? And for those of you online, I apologize. I don't know, you probably can't see my pointer. I don't know if I can. Do I have a cursor? So I have a cursor. So the 80 acres runs on North 60th. West Marion is the west side. And then, I don't know how to quantify this, but it is probably maybe a half a mile or less down Career on the east side. So this road, which is, this is 54th Street North. So this road here is University Trail. The original 80 acres are everything kind of where the inlets are, north to 60th.
Ryan?
The 40-acre option, we have not exercised yet. Yes. Okay.
What's that 40 before you answer that?
The 40 acres is not been identified yet. However, in 2019, Lifescape approached the Discovery District and said, hey, we're building a big campus. We're leaving 26th and Kiwanis. We're building a huge campus. It's going to be a $62 million project. And we entered into negotiations where we initially exercised that 40-acre right, but we had to give it back to the Board of Regents, technically, so it doesn't fall under our original master lease yet at this point, because Lifescape is now going somewhere else.
Finally, where's the building?
Yep, the building, the original building is, so if you're coming south from Walmart, because I love Walmart, it is the second main intersection. So that building is right here is where the original building was supposed to be. On the corner, on the southeast corner of Nobel and Francis. Thea, you said, I'm sorry, did we miss the question?
The question you mentioned vertically developing versus
Horizontal, yep.
The vertical was because you didn't have money.
Correct, yep. Meaning that the USD Discovery District in its original planned structure was never meant to be a developer. It was only operational for the park, meaning all of the heavy lifting on recruiting companies to come to South Dakota, recruiting companies to come to the Discovery District, and then also working with USD, Biomedical Engineering, the Office of Research. That was the programmatic side of everything. So that's why we recruited, or the original model was to recruit vertical developers. Thank you. Good questions. Anyone else? These are our partners.
Are you still on mute?
Ryan,
Oh, yes.
can you tell me, someone said a question on vertical development. I mean, why can't you vertically develop?
Yeah, great question. Because, so I come from the private sector, right? What am I? I'm a greedy capitalist, right? I want to own the buildings. I want to generate revenue, and I want to have an asset on my balance sheet. But the mission of the Discovery District, number one, is not to own those assets. It's essentially providing the environment. And the land being owned by the Board of Regents, we have a 99-year lease. I should mention, because I think President Abbott always makes me mention, it's a 99-year lease for $1 a year, but he was adamant about paying that whole lease up front. But so the other part of that is we just don't have capital, right? What's arguably the second most important part to developing land? Is money, right? I got to have partners. I got to have equity partners who are going to be able to invest, and they're going to require a certain return on investment for their dollars. So that's the primary reason why the Discovery District is not a vertical developer. Also, in the grand scheme of things, we were in the original model going to be maybe 3, if we're lucky, 4 people. And right now it's just 2 of us. And one of us spends a lot of time in Nantucket. Isn't me. But that's a good question. Because when I came in, I said, why wouldn't we own these buildings, right? Why can't we generate the revenue? Why can't we have that asset in our balance sheet? But it's just the funding structure doesn't allow for that. Our partners, USD contributes a significant chunk of our operating dollars. The Board of Regents also, City of Sioux Falls, and then Forward Sioux Falls, which you all know is a conglomeration of the Sioux Falls Area Chamber of Commerce, or Greater, I think it's Greater Chamber, Greater Sioux Falls Area Chamber now, and then the Sioux Falls Development Foundation. And project partners, we've walked hand in hand with the South Dakota Governor's Office of Economic Development, as well as the EDA and USD Foundation was a big part of putting that original deal together. This is our board of directors. Again, as I mentioned, the president of USD is always the chairperson of our board. We have Bob Sutton from Avera, Mayor Tanakin, Michelle Brunn from Sanford, Dr. Dave Kapaska, Deb Peters, Dr. Brian Maher as an ex officio voting. The executive director of the Board of Regents also always has, because obviously they're our shareholder. Regent Tim Rave, Kim Patrick, who's retired from Sanford Health, Bobby Tibbetts is a new member from Bender, Mark Mickelson, and then President Abbott. He always makes me put the emeritus part. I don't know what that means. And then we have ex officio non-voting, Bob Munt, who is the president CEO of the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, Dan Ingebretson, who's the director of the Gear Center and the vice president of the Office of Research for USD, and then Nathan Lucas, who is saved our pumpkin many times as the general counsel for the Board of Regents. He's the one that we run a lot of our agreements through. He's been a significant asset to our board. Any questions? Any other questions? No. How am I doing for time? I don't know how to subtract the 27 minutes from that, from that clock. So fast forward back to August of last year, President Abbott, one look at me, was like, I don't know if we can do this or not, because you look a little shady. We finally came to agreement, and the light bulb moment was there's money in our state legislature this year. Right. Everybody familiar with the processing facility that's being built up in Brookings? That'd be another great. So let me back up. Does everyone know the 3 kind of 4-ish primary research parks in South Dakota? No. So we have the USD Discovery District, which is my favorite. The research park at SDSU. You guys traveled up there. That's an amazing facility. and they're doing a bioprocessing plant. And it's a collaboration with the School of Mines and Poet. That gentleman's name who runs that park is Dwayne Chapel. Thea, I can get you his information. He's a great guy. Dwayne is actually really interesting because, in our world of the regental system, we have we kind of collaborate, but do we really collaborate sometimes? Dwayne has been the connector for the research parks. If you guys get a chance, in February, we host Research Park Day at the legislature. And I'm really thankful that our legislative session starts in February. But we go out there every year, and there, I think, Jackie, you asked me if there was going to be food here. There we have like shrimp and steak, and we just throw a big party to bring awareness to the research parks here in South Dakota, because many people don't know or understand what's going on. But we have to also kind of bond together because of, legislative decisions impact us, funding decisions impact us, economics impact us, research impacts us. So what Mr. Chapel has done is done a very good job at pulling us all together. So he runs the research park in Brookings, and then now Ascent, or I think now they joined their chamber and their development foundation out there to elevate Rapid City. They have has anybody traveled out to Rapid recently? Yeah, they have a phenomenal facility out there. They were on the School of Mines campus, and they're building a great big brand new building. It's an incubator / research building. But so those three, and then there at DSU, there's the cybersecurity research park, which is now there's going to be a huge piece of that here in Sioux Falls. So those are kind of the 4 research parks that are represented in the state of South Dakota. And what's unique about it is everyone kind of has their own specialty, their own focus, their own lane, except us, yeah. But we're building the building. So the reason I bring that up is because it's really important to understand that of all of the great things that are going on, all of the great people that we have, there are connectors in our state that do a really good job at carrying the banner, helping us understand, hey, what could the next steps be? What could the future look like? Because I firmly believe nothing's done in a vacuum. We will get less traction trying to do it alone, trying to do it ourselves. And this is a great example of it. So President Abbott, when we had that initial meeting, one of the light bulb moments was, hey, there's a bioprocessing facility being built in Brookings, right? Well, where did they get $20 million to do that? Well, some of it was from Poet, some of it was but a large chunk of it came from the state legislature. So we dreamt up, and when I say we, is like I'm the mouse in his pocket, but he dreamt up this building. And he said, if we can go to the state, now is probably a time more than ever than we would have a shot at getting dollars for us to, yes, vertically develop our own building. So the concept is about a 50,000 square foot building. The funding structure, the state brought in 15 million. We got 4 million in 2 chunks, 3.5 million from the city of Sioux Falls, the most recent agreement. And then we had some trailing dollars from the agreement from back in 2018. And then there's 2 private donors that are putting in the rest of the 25 million. So all of a sudden, the Discovery District we have land, and now we have money, which we haven't really, I think, and this is just my opinion, but in the beginning, there are very few people thought that we would be able to, or when I say we, Kent Peterson, previous House of Representative, and then also President Abbott, President Gestring. I think very few people thought we would be able to pull off this request. In fact, it looked kind of dim February 4th when we went to, I think it was the 4th or the 3rd, we went to the JCA, Joint Committee on Appropriations. And one of the questions was why? But we pulled it off, and it was a huge lift. I mean, a lot of people were involved in getting this. And at the time, President Abbott, which I firmly understand, he's in Naples. He spends the winters in Naples, poor guy, Florida. Came back, I think 6 or 7 times to the thriving metropolis of Pier in the warm, balmy weather. And he lived at the Capitol. And he walked around and he shook hands and he told people, he shared his vision. We had people from Sanford, Tim Rave's son from Sanford. We had Deb Peters. They all gave testimony to say, hey, this really is something that will make a difference. So the first model of the building is a 50,000 square foot core and shell. We're going to build it out in phases. We have a couple anchor tenants that we're negotiating now. Because another question, another answer to the question on anybody here a real estate developer or been involved or invested in? No. If I'm a developer and I'm building a building, what do I probably want to know before I even spend $1 on construction?
Going in
In the neighborhood, yeah, the surrounding areas. That's a very good point. Even more important than that, though. Yeah, who said? Tenant. I want to know that somebody's going to pay me rent, because the last thing I want to do is build a building and have it sit empty, right? Because what's more expensive than empty real estate in the development world, right? So most of your private developers require between 60 and 75%, sometimes as high as 80% occupancy before they'll even start the planning process. And what does the Discovery District not have? Tenants. Yeah, our tenants got scared away by COVID, which I totally understand, but we didn't have a tenant for them. And that's another reason why these state dollars are so important, because we need carrying costs for that empty building. And so the original models, we're going to build it out in a third, right? So in a building, if it's a 50,000 square foot building, as we all know, I can't generate revenue from all 50,000 square feet, right? I mean, I'd love to charge, and I'm sure, Jay, you probably, I mean, well, I don't know how it's structured, but you don't charge for hallways. And although I did have a $50 a month fee for using the kitchen when I was here, but there's certain square feet you can't charge for hallways, the HVAC room, the elevator space, right? So on average, you've got about 75, 80% of revenue generating square footage. So I lose, 12, 15,000 square foot to everything it takes to operate the building. So the rest of the revenue generating square foot, we're going to build out the first third and hopefully have our tenants secured before too long. And then then it's my job, I think, to go and recruit companies or help organizations, help USD Sioux Falls, what kind of collaborative partners would fit in here, right? The city of Sioux Falls, what organizations that fit our mission, biotech, research, who do they have on the hook? The Sioux Falls Development Foundation, right? It's their job. We've got a huge space up here. You guys toured Foundation Park, just north of here. If you haven't, I would recommend take a Sunday drive out there, because there's really not. But I mean, that's an amazing feat to bring Amazon, FedEx, some of those others, right? And we have to the west of us, University Hills Apartments, which I think there's going to be a total of 11 of those buildings that have 300 or so units per building. And then all of the development that's going along south of 54th. It's this little corner here. If this is the roundabout, you go south on Career. There's a lot of things happening out here. Everything that's going on north of 60th, right? You guys weathered the North Star Grill. I know Aaron lives there on Fridays, but everything to the east there, that's all happening as well, right? Hospitality, and then all the way across, we have Sanford, right? So when you talk about what's going on around the Discovery District, no time has been more prime than today for us to focus on trying to drive or recruit businesses that are going to keep brilliant minds here in South Dakota. The biomedical engineers, the MBAs, the PAs, health sciences, right? I mean, we're just in a very unique place in our history. Any questions? No? Okay.
I have one, Ryan,
Yes.
this is Judy. Where did SAB go?
That's a great question. So they purchased a building over by Sanford. By and large, mostly SAB was in the Sanford Research building.
Yeah, we
Okay, office.
visited them there once.
Yes, yep. And so a lot of their, some of their research work has stayed there. And then they, I believe it was Midwest Tool and Die was the building that they purchased and they renovated. I don't know, full disclosure, I don't know if they're all the way in there, if they're still, where they're at, but given what happened last year with the SPAC, I know they have more resources and a lot of things that they could, I think there was some regional kind of conversations, but I don't know entirely, but I do know that they were at the Sanford Innovation Building. And then they have their farm down by Canton, right? The cows and the
Right.
therapeutics and stuff. So yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Yeah. So the last thing I'll leave you with, again, I don't want to put you to sleep here, but it's a 25-year horizon, right? I don't have the ability here to think out 25 years. I struggle getting here on time today, right, Thea? So, but somebody has, people have, right? We're estimating 2,800 new jobs. This original master plan, I believe, had something 26 buildings in it. Now, nothing ever ends up being exactly what it is, right, when it's finished, but the idea is each of these parcels of land will be designated for a separate building. And all along Nobel, it's supposed to be mixed use, right? That's where I get my coffee shop. Love to have a dry cleaner because my wife said she's never ironing a shirt of mine. FedEx, the ancillary services that would be really important to not only service the Discovery District tenants, but USD Sioux Falls, right? We have needs as the use of this space grow, and the Discovery District wants to be mindful of that. So $314-ish million in facility construction. These are all 2018 numbers too, right? I think we can all agree now we can probably add 200% to that construction cost. In 2019, a parking lot. Anybody ever think about parking? Because in South Dakota, I don't know if it's just South Dakota, but I want to drive up to the door, get out, and walk into the door, right? Of the store, the restaurant, whatever. I never thought about that. When we priced the first building, the first model, anybody have a guess on what a parking spot costs on average? 10? No, a little lower than that, but thank you. I like that because now the number today doesn't seem as bad. It was about $3,500 per spot. And you think about that, that is not money you can generate, or not land you generate revenue from. Because if I said, hey, you guys, SAB, you get 2 parking spots, right? And the other thing to remember is all of the parking out here is public. So guess who gets to pay for all of that? Discovery District. We get to put the streets in, but we get to turn those over to the city. So anyway, this number is probably way, way higher these days. Infrastructure construction, right? At the time, without paving, I think on average, it was about, the quoted number was about a street, I think was between $380 and $420 a linear foot. Ever think about that when you're driving down the road? Yeah, pretty interesting, right? $8.4 million in shared parking. You divide that by 3,500 in 2019, you know how many spots we'd come up with. Here's where the city gets excited. Excise tax, property tax. So the impact that this can have without creating jobs, without creating a commercialized product, without selling me a cup of coffee, is important to keep in mind, because obviously with inflation and costs and everything, these numbers change on an annual basis. again, I typically end with Francis and then the E.O. Lawrence story, but I'd like to, at this point, if you guys have questions. Yes.
Now that you mentioned Francis, and I know you have nothing to do with this, but I'm wondering why they named that street Francis instead of Kelsey. It's like naming a street for Albert Einstein and calling it Al.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question is why the street, Francis Avenue, why did the powers that be choose Francis instead of, I'm assuming, like Kelsey or Francis Kelsey Avenue, right? I apologize. And at that point, that's like way above my pay scale. But I don't know what process that went into naming the streets, other than we're just trying to make sure that there was a statement about the connection that South Dakota has to the rest of the world. But good point. Anybody else? What's next? Lunch or do you guys? There's not going to be. You guys don't have tests, right? No tests. Okay. Good. Oh, that could very well be. Yeah. Do you guys? I mean, has anybody tried to name a street in Sioux Falls? You should look up the process. You have to compare exactly that. All the other streets, there's like you have like a character maximum. It can't be, there's no offensive, obviously, but it's a process, and it goes into, you have to kind of like, really kiss up to the mayor and the rest of planning and development. But yeah, it is definitively a interesting process. I thought you could just pick a name and then slap it up there, and if there was another name, you just put 2 behind it, or Junior, or the third, or whatever. But no, so that could ultimately be one of the reasons why. Yeah. Anything else? Okay.
What's the estimated timeline on construction?
Yeah, thank you for asking. The question is, what's the estimated timeline on the building? So July 8th, I released an RFP for A&E, or architecture and engineering, right? So we all know, based on this presentation and my ability to hook the mic up, I'm probably not designing the building, right? We don't want me doing that. So we're going to get a professional firm that's going to do all of the architectural engineering, the civil. They're going to design the whole infrastructure of the building. And then today, the 7th today, is that right? It's still Friday. Today we're releasing an RFP for a construction manager at risk. So we know we have certain tenants already lined up. We're going to start the design process in December, and ideally, and if all of the stars line up, there's a lot of stars to line up, we want to have a building close to or completed by the end of 2024. That would be the second miracle that we would have accomplished in 3 years.
In the same spot as the original building was going to go?
Yeah, I was. Thank you. The question is it going to be in the same spot? And I was kind of hoping that question wasn't going to come up.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Because of the size of the building, I mean, we think about a 50,000 square foot building. Jay, how big is this building? The Gear Center is 22,000 square feet, and it's kind of small. This would be obviously just a little over double that. In the grand scheme of things, it's not a very big building. So the thought process is, as you guys remember, the original building was right here. And on that piece of land, a 50,000 square foot building would look kind of lonely. So we don't, the short answer is we don't know. But it would probably most likely be either on the east side of that parcel, or and don't tell Mr. Barkham of this, but we want to take up his parking lot and his shed. We endearingly refer to it as Block 12. But if you drive out there, and I encourage you guys to drive out there, from the west side of where the original building is to the east side, there's a 16-foot elevation change. So which presents a lot of challenges when you're building a ground level building. However, it also presents some opportunity for mixed use. So what we want to do is make sure we reserve the best spots out here for really, really big prospects. Companies that are bringing a lot of employees or brand new research or new technologies. We want to give them the best spots. So that actually, it's a good question. Thank you for. I struggle sometimes because I know where I want the building to go. Yes, sir.
Do we have any of those buildings kind of earmarked for like?
So the question is, are any of the buildings or any of the plans out here restricted or earmarked for USD Sioux Falls expansion? And I'm going to let Mr. Perry answer that. Right now, what's really interesting about all of this is because of the 3 letters that are in front of our name, we become synonymous with everything that's going on at USD. However, we're 2 very separate entities, both under the control of the Board of Regents, but there is a clear line, a property line, a line of demarcation between USD Sioux Falls and the Discovery District. But we are not, well, as long as I'm here, we're going to focus on not being bad neighbors. And so the idea, one of the things that got kicked around, you ask about building location, is the southeast corner of this roundabout. But again, it causes some confusion as to whether or not it's, now we would welcome the presence of USD Sioux Falls in any of our buildings, so long as 2 things, we have control over that decision and it makes financial sense, right? But the way that symbiotic relationship works is it's kind of a planning effort that goes in. So every meeting that I have on this, USD is absolutely taken into consideration. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Just to the south.
I'm
Yeah.
optimistic that we'll need that space at some point.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Yes. And again, you know, this is only my philosophy, right? But the three legs on the economic and workforce development stool are private, public, and education or higher education, right? You guys walk across the Skyway and you go into the Gear Center, you'll see a lot of really, really smart people solving world problems, human condition problems, working on gene editing. They're working on biomechanical engineering devices. The hope and the idea is that those programs expand, and there is a need for that as that program grows, as things are commercialized. You know, another recommendation, I don't like throwing a bunch of, but a USD's tech transfer officer leads a program called TRACK. It's Technology Readiness Accelerator. It's a C, not a K, Center. And we're taking, and I worked with this program for the last 2 years. They're taking IP, everybody know what, intellectual property. Somebody's invented some piece. So they're taking IP from Sanford and USD and putting them in this commercialization plan to see if there's any market out there for them. And there's been, I think, 3 or 4 companies spun out of that in the last 2 years. And so, Jay, to your point, those are why we want to make the opportunity for USD to have places out here, because those are companies are going to need places to land. So good question. Anything else? I know I keep saying, trying to wrap up.
Right, and I have one question, which I'm not sure we addressed. Is there a target date for a product or service to come out from the Discovery Center?
So the question, okay, so the question is there a product or service? We are just, and I want to oversimplify it, but we are going to be landlords and horizontal developers. We hope that the products and services that come out of our tenants' businesses go to commercialization very fast, right? And remember, we recruit later stage companies, so companies who aren't just starting up, but they're companies who have funding, they're maybe completing their R&D, they're maybe just pre-commercialization, but we hope that those companies are the ones that are producing the products and services. Did I answer that question right? I think, okay. Thank you guys. I appreciate your time. Thanks for weathering has it been an hour? Almost an hour. And if you guys have any questions, I'll be around afterwards for a few minutes. So thank you.